In this video, we want to talk more about some of the deployment and DevOps practices that is offered to you by Sevalla. If you've been following along in this series, you've learned how to deploy your applications, manage your databases, and work with the basics. Today, we are taking it to the next level. We are going to transform you from someone who can deploy applications to someone who can architect complete DevOps pipelines that scale with your teams. So by the end of this, you'll learn about Sevalla's pipeline system for environment management, preview apps and pull request workflows, which we have already seen a glimpse of in the last video when we were deploying our static site. You'll also learn advanced deployment strategies, including zero downtime deployments, and we'll build a complete production pipeline together. So let's dive in. The first thing that I want to talk about is what are pipelines. A pipeline is basically a structured approach to moving your code from development through testing and to production. So think of it as an assembly line for your applications. Two kinds of pipelines. First is trunk-based pipeline, and the second one is Git flow-based pipelines. Now, trunk-based pipelines, this is perfect for teams who use the feature branch based practices and they directly merge to main. And same way, the Git flow based workflow, this is good for teams who have dedicated development, staging and production branches. And the prime benefit of this is you build the same code once and deploy it everywhere. No more building the same code for different environments. So let's talk about trunk based pipeline first, then we'll get to Git flow based pipeline. Let's just go to Sevalla's dashboard and we'll see how all of these work. We'll go to Sevalla and we'll go to applications, and here there is a button called add pipeline. When we click on this, we are asked the name of the pipeline and what kind of strategy that we want to go for, either trunk based development or Git flow based development. And they also have a very nice animation here to explain the difference between the trunk based development and Git flow based development. But traditionally, software engineering teams used to have the trunk-based development workflow. But in recent times, we are moving to Git flow-based. Now, the primary difference is, as you can see in the animation here, previously what we used to do, we used to have a main branch, and every time a new PR, a new branch is merged into the main branch, a new workflow used to start. Basically means that the code of main branch would be deployed in a dev environment and people will be testing there. Mostly developers would test the code, the functionality in the development environment, the dev environment. Then after that, they'll push into the staging environment. Now, in staging environment, more people would get involved. People like the testing teams or the sales teams or whoever is involved in that feature, they can take a look at the feature, they can test it out, and after everything is satisfied in the staging environment, we will push the same code to prod so that that code is available to all our users. And the same way, if we take a look at the Git flow based workflow, which is a very recent practice, here what we have different branches for different environments. We have our dev branch for dev environment. We have our staging branch for staging environment. We have our prod environment for our main branch. What happens after a PR is ready, after a PR is complete, that usually gets merged into the dev branch and we can test the code, that functionality in the dev environment. Same way when it gets merged into the next branch, we can test the functionality using the staging environment. And finally, we merge the code in the main branch and that gets available to all our users in the prod environment. So let me create a new pipeline. I'll call it as trunk pipeline and let me click on add pipeline and we'll land on this screen, which is our pipeline dashboard, and we can control a lot of things from here. So let's first go ahead and add another stage here, which is called staging, and we'll move this to the second phase. Click create stage. Now we have the perfect setup. So let's just create different environments here. Let's create a new app. We'll call it as next dev. Location is Mumbai, which is fine. We want the same data center. Same way, we'll create a staging app. We'll call that as next staging and we'll click on add app. And finally, we'll create next prod, which is going to be our production. Now let's go to a dashboard, and here we can see that 3 more applications have been created. What we want to do, we want to configure the Git repository for each application. So we can come here and go into settings, and we'll go to settings and update source, and we'll click on Git repository. Private is fine, and we'll select the next demo and automatic deployment on commit, right? And we'll say update. Going back to our overview, let's click on deploy. Main is fine, and deploy application. Now let's go ahead and do the same thing for our other environments. For staging also, we'll come here and we go to settings, and we'll click on update source, and the repository we want is next demo, branch is main branch, and we'll not have automatic deployment on commit, right? I'll click on update. By going to deployments, we can start a new deployment. For now, let's do the same thing for our prod also. Let's go to settings, update source, and make this next demo, and we'll keep automatic deployment and commit disabled, and click on update. Let's go to deployments and start a new. The next thing that I want to do is I want to delete an existing, the my next app application, because we now are following a pipeline. We don't need the old workflow. Let's just go here and click on danger zone and delete application. And that is successfully deleted. We now have 3 environments, one for dev, one for staging, and one for prod. And we are going to see how the whole pipeline works with our coding workflow. And after a few minutes, we can see that all 3 environments are successfully deployed with our main branch. For now, this does not offer a lot of advantages, because if we go to applications and click on, let's say, dev, and we visit the app here, same way we come to trunk pipeline and we click on next prod and visit the app here, then both of them have the same view, right? But let's say we want to make some new change. I'll open my code here and go to the page. Let's say I come here where we have change 1, and I'll write here, this is an experimental change. What I'll do, I'll add this and I'll push into main branch. And if you go back to our Sevalla dashboard, you can see that our next dev environment has started deploying this change, because when we were creating this environment, we checked the mark where it asked if we want to deploy new changes whenever a new commit is pushed into the main branch. But we did not check that for these 2 environments, because we want to explicitly promote the changes. We want to explicitly push the changes if everything works fine in our dev environment. So if you go to our pipeline, we can see that this, our next dev environment, is currently getting deployed. If everything works fine in our development environment, then we can promote the changes to our staging environment. If that also works fine, then we can finally promote the changes to our production. So we'll see how this works after this gets deployed successfully. Okay, our development environment has been deployed successfully. If we try to visit this URL, we can see that this change is here. This is an experimental change. But if you go back and click on our staging environment, then it still shows the old code, right? This is great. This is exactly what we want. Now what we want to promote this change, our development environment change, into our staging environment, so that other people like testing teams and sales teams, they can also test this. I'll click on this and click on promote. And now we can see that our staging environment has started deploying the process, and in a few minutes, we should be able to see the change in our staging environment. And this is here, the deployment was successful. And if we try to visit this staging environment now we can see our change here. And same way, if you go to our development environment, and finally, let's say everything looks all right to us, then we want to promote our staging changes, whatever changes that have been tested by us, the developers and the testing team and the sales team, whoever was involved. Then we can finally click on promote here, which will push all the changes from our staging environment to our production environment. So click on promote, and that starts another deployment for our production. So let's wait for a few seconds, and then we can test our changes in our production environment. And the deployment is done here. We can click on the production URL, and finally we see the change here, right? One more thing that we can do in this whole trunk based pipeline is enable preview applications. For this, we again have to select our application. We want to select both of these, which means that we automatically want to create a new preview deployment. A new application will be created for each pull request, and it will automatically get deleted either if the pull request is closed or after a few days when it becomes stale. We can select the location, the build, type mix packs is fine, processes, web process, this is also fine, this is fine, environment variables, we don't need any. Let's enable this. Next thing that you want to check is whether we are able to create preview apps through PRs. So let's do one thing. Let's check out into a new branch called PR, and let's do another change here. Write down here, we'll say that this is a change from PR. Okay, let's add this commit and we'll push this to our PR branch. So that is done. Let's go to our GitHub. Here we can see that a new branch has been created called PR. And by clicking on this, we can create a new pull request. So let's create a pull request, and we won't merge it yet, but we can see that Kinsta has picked it up and it has started creating a new preview application for that. We come here, we can see that a new application is being created here for our PR branch since we created a new pull request. And when this gets created and is able to deploy successfully, we can preview the changes here. After that, we can merge it into the main branch, then it will be reflected here, then we can promote it to here, then we can promote it to here. This is a very streamlined workflow, especially in the trunk-based workflow. And after a few minutes, we can see that this has been deployed successfully. We go to our dashboard and we go to our applications. There is a new application here, which is temporary. This is a preview application, and this will be automatically closed when the PR gets merged. So let's see if we can preview the changes here. We visit here. Here we can see the change that we made. This is a change from PR. The next thing what we can try is we can go to GitHub. We can go to our pull requests and we can go ahead and merge this into main branch, right? Merge this, and let's go here and do applications and to our trunk pipeline. Here you see that since we merged this PR, this is now getting deleted, but now our application is getting deployed for our dev environment. Since we merged these changes into this phase, this gets deployed, then this gets deployed, and this gets deleted. And after a few minutes, we can see that this preview app is gone. It is completely deleted automatically since that PR is merged into our main branch, and our dev environment is deployed successfully. So if you try to visit this, you can see that this change from PR is appearing in our dev environment. Then again, if you want, we can go ahead and promote these changes to our staging environment. This again starts a new deployment in our staging environment, which again will be reflected in our URL. Then we can go ahead and promote it to our prod environment. So this is the complete workflow, starting from creating a new branch, creating a PR, and previewing and viewing the changes of the PR with a temporary domain. Then when we merge that PR into the main branch, the dev environment getting deployed, then we promoted that to our staging environment. It is also deployed, as you can see here. And finally, we can go ahead and promote it, which will again start a prod deployment. And after a few seconds, that also gets deployed, and we can click on this and see the change in our production environment. Great. That is all about trunk-based pipeline that I wanted to talk about. Now let's go ahead and delete this. We'll talk about Git flow based pipeline now. Let's go to applications and click on add pipeline. Let's select Git flow now, and we'll name this Git flow. Let's click on add pipeline, and we land here, which looks pretty much similar to our trunk based pipeline, but this works in a different manner. So in order to test this, let's go ahead and create a new environment, which is called staging, and we'll move it to the middle, and let's create staging, and we'll also add our application. For dev, we'll add dev, add application. For staging, we'll add staging environment, and same for main. And one more thing that we have to change here is we have to go inside for next dev. what we want to do, we want to go to settings and want to click on source, and default branch that you want to select is a develop branch. So for that to appear, what we have to do, we can come to GitHub and we can click on new branch. The branch name will be develop and the source will be main. We are checking out from main and we'll create the new branch. The same way we will create another branch which is called staging, and we'll also create that. Okay, great. Now coming back here to our Sevalla dashboard, let's do a refresh here and we'll click on update source. Here for the default branch, we want to select develop, and we'll enable this, which is automatically deploy on commit, and we'll update this. Let's do the same thing for our other environment also. For staging, let's go ahead and go to settings, update source, default branch would be staging, and I missed. We also want to automatically deploy on commit here, update, right? We don't have to do anything for the prod environment because by default, the main branch was anyway selected, and we want to deploy any changes on commit for the main branch. So let's enable this and click on update. Now let's go to our pipeline and understand what exactly that we are planning with this, the Git flow pipeline. One thing that you will notice here is, like our previous trunk based pipeline, we don't have any promote button here, which means that this workflow, and this workflow is completely independent. So how we actually work with this kind of setup is, let's say these are developers that are pushing code. Previously, how it used to work is they used to push to a particular branch, which is a main branch, a single branch, and that branch would trigger the deployment for this environment. And from here to here, the promote button that we had, that was in our control, and we pushed code from one environment to the next environment until we reached production. But in this kind of setup, what we are intending to do is we have different branches. Let's say for dev environment, we have the develop branch. For staging environment, we have the staging branch. And for the production environment, we have the main branch. Depending on which environment that we want to see our change in, we can merge our code in those branches. So for the first phase, when we want to test among ourselves, which is basically developers, we want to merge our code into the develop branch, which means this particular environment will be triggered and we'll be able to see the changes in this URL. Same way, after this is done, what we want to do, we want to merge the same code in the staging environment. Then we'll be able to test it using this URL. And finally, when everything goes right, we'll raise a pull request from staging to main. And when we merge that, we'll be able to deploy our production environment and see the changes there. So that is the primary difference between the trunk based workflow and the Git flow based workflow. Depending on your choices, depending on your priorities and how your team works, you can choose either of them, and both of them work fine, but it depends on you and your team. With that, we don't have anything else to talk about pipelines. Let's go ahead and delete next dev and next staging. We don't need to keep those now. Go to danger zone, delete application. We'll also go ahead and delete Git flow pipeline, and let's also delete our next staging environment. And then the next thing that I want to talk about is the health check. We have a feature here. If you go to settings, there is a feature called the health check path. Now we need health checks to ensure we have zero downtime deployments. This is how the whole flow basically works. Let's say you trigger something and it starts a new deployment. Sevalla starts a new deployment for your code. When it does that, Sevalla keeps all your old containers or your old pods, which is a terminology from Kubernetes. They are kept intact, but for the new deployment, a new set of pods or a new set of containers are created while the old ones are still serving the requests. Finally, when the new containers, the new pods are live, they are able to take traffic. They expose a particular endpoint, usually something like status or health, right? A endpoint which is exposed from the application or the server. So what Sevalla does, or the infrastructure does, it tries to send a request to that particular endpoint, either status or health. If the response is 200, which is a successful response, which means that these new containers are live. That means Sevalla can redirect all the traffic from here to here, and it will finally go ahead and delete these. This whole setup ensures that at no point user will get something like 502, right? Some kind of error because your application has went down. This is called zero downtime deployment. And that's why you have been provided with this option here where you can provide your health check path. So that's what I want to show next. Let's go to our code, and I have created a new endpoint in our Next.js app, which basically is a get request, and we are returning a response which is of status 200, and we are returning a couple of fields like status, timestamp, uptime, environment, version, etc. What you want to do is add this and push it to main branch. But before I push this, let's go ahead and let's add our route here, right? And the route that we have created is /health. What I'll do, we'll add /health. And when we do this, what exactly happens is when we do a new deployment, new pods, new containers will start with the new or updated code. And Sevalla will check this /health endpoint every 10 seconds. Only when the new pods, the new containers with the updated code, they pass the health check, then only Sevalla will divert all the traffic from the old containers to the new containers. So that will help us have zero downtime deployment. So let's update this and we'll go ahead and push these changes, and that should get picked up by Sevalla and a new deployment has been started. Our deployment is failing here because we did a mistake, which is supposed to be /API/health since it is a Next.js application. And let's go ahead and update this. We'll have to cancel the previous deployment and start a new deployment for that. Deploy changes. And here we see that our deployment is successful. And if we try to visit our app and let's say we try to test our health check, we are getting a response, which is the expected response of 200. The status is okay. We have a timestamp, uptime, environment, and the version, right? We cannot manually test the health check functionality of Sevalla, the zero downtime deployment, because it happens so fast and rapidly. But our health check endpoint is working. Our deployment went through. So you should be rest assured that your zero downtime deployment is working fine. So that's pretty much all I wanted to talk about in this video. Some of the deployment practices, some of the patterns, pipelines, and the zero downtime deployment.